Hello and welcome to a fantastic first look show. We are here today to talk about Magic the Gathering, Avatar: The Last Airbender coming up. This is our first look at the set, and for those who don't know, first looks are pretty early sneak peeks at the set. We do these kind of early so that we can give stores and distributors an idea of what they're signing up for. But as a bonus, you, the fan, get to learn a bit as well. And actually, it's going to be more than a bit today because we're showing off a number of cards today. In a moment, we're going to show you a really cool short video that's going to have a bunch of those cards in it. Don't worry about trying to pause or screen grab anything because we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it all with our two fantastic guests, Chris Mooney and Dylan Devaney. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Excited to be here.
Yeah.
We work on things so far ahead in time. So for years, I've been waiting and waiting to finally get to talk about this set. And so, super excited to get into it.
I'm asking a very obvious question based on what you're wearing, but were you a fan before you started working on this set?
Just a little bit. I would say I would put Avatar as merely maybe my #1 TV show of all time.
All right.
I was a huge fan coming in. And really, this was a dream come true. I tell the story of way back when I was a kid, way before, studying game design or, getting this job at Wizards. I would just make Magic cards for fun. And Avatar Magic cards were one of the things that I made as a kid. So really getting to do that for real as a job is like a total dream come true for me.
I bet. All right. Well, we're going to come back and talk with Chris and Dylan in a moment. But before we do that, let's take our first look at Magic the Gathering and Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Water, earth, fire, air. Discover the cards of Magic the Gathering, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Crack Aangs Iceberg. It's your choice to follow Aang's journey or write your own legend. Yep. Explore the 4 nations with full art Appa lands. And discover the power of Avatar Aang as he transforms into Aang, master of the elements. Get a glimpse of Aang's full potential with show creator Brian Konietzko's raised foil Avatar Aang card. But while Aang's bending skills are great, you'll need the whole gang to save the world. And Team Avatar isn't complete without Appa, steadfast guardian, and Momo, friendly flyer. Befriend them and other hybrid creatures along the way. Find iconic Avatar scenes in the set, like Saka's Haiku. Pivotal moments define you. Faded firepower asks who you are. And Redirect Lightning asks what kind of bender you want to be. Collect Avatar: The Last Airbender lore, including cards like The Rise of Sozin, Firelord Sozin. Find your people. Become the Avatar. Discover your destiny. And don't forget to hit up your favorite local vendors. See more of Magic the Gathering, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Tuesday, October 28th on the debut stream. Flameo, Hotman!
And welcome back. As I said, don't worry about trying to go back and look at any of that or take screenshots because we're going to talk through everything you just saw and maybe even a little bit more. So we're going to start. I want to start with those Appa lands that we saw because I think one of the cool things about this set is it really takes you on a journey, much like the show, through this entire world. So how intentional was that for the set?
I mean, so much of the show is focused on their journey, physically through the world, and also, of course, their corresponding character journeys through that. But I am someone who oftentimes in Magic sets, the land art is my favorite art. And getting to bring this world to life at such a, a high level of fidelity that we've never been able to see before. Like getting to see these locations that we've been to, these landscapes that are beautiful, just brought to life in a whole new way. That was just something that was so exciting to me about getting to bring Avatar into Magic.
Yeah, let's put those landscapes up on the screen so we can take a look at them. Yeah, these are gorgeous.
Yeah, visually, we pitched around a couple of ideas on like how to tackle the basics, because in Magic, basic lands are the lens to see our worlds and planes, and in Universes Beyond, it's a way for us to see the world that we know and that we love. And so when we were talking about like different things that we could do, it's like, well, the gang, they see their world through Appa. They're always flying on his back on this globe-trotting adventure. Wouldn't it be cool if we could recreate that feeling for the players? Feeling you're on Appa, seeing these iconic vistas and locations, whether you're flying over Ba Sing Se, you're going to the South Pole, trying not to get sucked up by a tornado or across the swamp. There's all these locations that gives us that sense of visitation and journey, calls back nostalgia from the various books, and are also just emblematic of their mana colors. I think it's a great way for us to help these two wonderful IPs come together to create just a very nice new lens for something that we already love.
Yeah.
There are a lot of iconic elements from the show, but I think that just seeing Appa in the sky is perhaps one of the most iconic visual elements of the show. I mean, I realize now as I'm talking about it, literally my phone case that I have is a little Appa flying in the sky. So really, really iconic.
Yeah, well, we're also going to visit some iconic and familiar locations. We're not going to show a ton of them today, but we are going to show one that's going to look familiar to Avatar fans. It's going to look familiar to some Magic fans too, mechanically. So let's take a look at Southern Air Temple. Yes, shrines are coming back. So, Chris, tell us about this card.
I mean, the shrines, really early on, someone said, hey, wouldn't it be fun to have shrines? They visit many shrines, throughout the world, many connected with various different locations and nations and elements. And once we put them in, they never left because we all loved them so much. So, this is one of, a couple of different shrines that perhaps that we'll get a look at, in the future. But one of the other things that we wanted to do from a design perspective is we still wanted shrines to have that identity of caring about how many shrines you have and scaling with your shrines, but in a kind of a new way. So you'll see that the shrines in this set, they work just a little bit differently from previous shrines, but will still fit very well with all of the existing shrine cards in Magic. And very fun to draft.
And creatively, a lot of the shrines in the world we pick to be places of reverence or spiritual importance or connected to the Avatar. So you can see here, obviously, it's right in the flavor text, the birthplace of the Last Airbender. The shrines and inside the world of Avatar, the idea of being connected through spirit and through your previous generations and previous Avatar cycles is a point of reverence. And so we try to be very intentional about where we pick the shrines, what locations, what art we are going to do for them, so they kind of feel like that notion of reverence.
And one thing, that we will see a lot of moving forward here, but we've got the Airbending, watermark symbol here on this card, and we'll get a look at a good number of these elemental symbols as we go.
All right. Well, speaking of as we go, we mentioned this you journey through this world, but this set also seems very intentional in taking you through the story and the important moments and character developments. So, of course, everything started when this first piece of art occurred. But how much did you build in actual story moments and journeying through the story?
It's a great and loaded question, which I really appreciate. Chris and I, super early on, were like, we can get every episode in. In fact, we can get multiple moments an episode in. You could fan out the box, and you should be able to watch the show. And we really tried to hit a lot of those beats, a lot of those character moments, a lot of those story moments, and not just the present day, but we have lore and history of events that set up the cycles. And so it was incredibly intentional. In fact, we would be watching episodes, be like, yo, Chris, this is such a small moment. Do you think we can put it in? Dylan's already in. You don't even gotta worry about it. Obviously, it's going. I was like, okay, nice. Let's go watch the next episode. And so that was really fun to try and figure out like how we could tell the full story of Avatar through almost like beat for beat shots of emblematic episode moments. Or sometimes an episode was so important and so dense we got to do multiple cards for it.
Yeah.
And this was such a fun art piece. I think we got this one relatively early on, and it really helped to set the tone of just the entire look and feel of the set. So exciting. Just I remember seeing this art and being like, oh, it's real now.
Yeah.
Like I knew we were making it, but looking at this, I was like, it really hit me like we're going to be making, such an awesome representation of the show.
Yeah. One of the cards we showed in that short video that happens very near the start is Aangs Iceberg. So it says waterbending. We're going to talk about mechanics in a bit. We've got a whole mechanics section that we're going to go through, but talk a little bit about this story moment, what this card's capturing.
So, again, talking about iconic moments from the show, this is one that, is, again, one of the most iconic visuals of just Aang in the iceberg with Appa. It's from the first episode, which, gets shown off so much, when the show was coming out, like in all of the ads and the trailers and everything. But obviously, it's just an iconic moment and really important story moment as well. Capturing this in design, it was really important that Aang's Iceberg serves as both a kind of, imprisonment for him, so a place that he is stuck for 100 years, but also something that saved him from catastrophe, right? Like it came about to save his life and to preserve him for when the world needed him most. So getting that feeling of, this can lock something away, but also it can temporarily save your own thing and maybe you'll get it back later, was really what we were going for with the design, and really happy with the way that this captures kind of the story moment of Aang being in the iceberg.
And one of the things about the art that I love so much about this piece specifically is that it's very magical feeling. Now, we know in world, Qatara tells us immediately in the first episode, bending is not magic, right? And so when we are Magic the Gathering, we need to find a way to ensure that bending feels like bending, but our cards still feel like magic cards. So finding ways to take a scene that we all remember, an iconic visual, and kind of bring it through some sort of magical lens was part of the early challenge to kind of like really get this collaboration right. And I think this piece does such a good job of feeling mystical and magical and important and strange and interesting, which is what a good piece of magic art can do. It asks you questions, and even if you weren't familiar with the scene, you could see this, and like there's a lot of storytelling happening here, which is what some of the best magic pieces do. Just like the Fire Nation Attacks piece of art, this is another really early piece of art that helps kind of wayfind and pathfind our way to what the set wanted to look like. And so every time I see this, I'm like, we did it. I'm very happy about that, and especially in the enchantment frame, like it has that vibe that we're going for. So again, we know that bending isn't magic, but our game is magical. So trying to find and balance those two, I think this card is a really good way to satisfy both creatives.
I remember a conversation that we had very early on where you were like, in the show they say, it's not magic, it's waterbending, and I was like, but we're Magic the Gathering, so we're gonna still be leading into that magical element. I think this piece also, just in as beautiful as it is, really captures something that we and specifically Dylan here, who is the creative lead and led the art process. We spoke a lot with Avatar Studios and with the creators to get the look and feel of the set right. They had a lot of very specific things that they were looking for. But one of the things that was really motivating was that a kind of sentiment that came from them was, we want it to kind of look like what it looks like in our imaginations, like to be vibrant and to be, if we had an unlimited budget, what would the show have looked like, right? And so I think that we're going to get to see a lot of moments from the show captured in a totally new way that is still very true to the original vision of that team.
Yeah, and just on that notion, Matt Kubata and I spent a lot of time with everyone over with the original creators and the team over there, kind of distill down exactly what imagination meant to them and what they wanted the show to be, where they wanted to bring it, where they want it now, but also pairing that against what the fan expects to see, what they remember. And so it's kind of like we all have our different visualizations of what the creators intended intended, what we want to make, and what the fans expect to see. And so just special shout out to Matt and the art directors. They spent so much time, especially early on, kind of weaving that intricate web to kind of find this nice point where we could flex in different directions, so everyone would be hopefully not just satisfied, but thrilled and excited of what they see.
Now, we're not going to see just moments that build the story, but how the characters develop as well. And I think maybe one of the characters who displays that the most is Zuko. And so here we've got Zuko Conflicted. That's art. That will be a card. We're not showing that one today. And then we've got Fire Lord Zuko on the right there. So talk a little bit about Zuko here.
Right. So one of the things, there are 3 books in Avatar. And so that felt really natural for a lot of our main characters to get 3 different versions of them that represent them at different points in their journey. So here, Fire Lord Zuko, I mean, this is literally the last episode of the show.
Yeah.
The ultimate, ending point for Zuko's character, where he's redeemed and helped to take down the Fire Nation and, ascended to the throne. And we'll also see kind of with some other cards that we'll see later today, we will see that as we go through, characters also pick up additional colors. We're going to see kind of the 3-color version is oftentimes the final version of them in the story. Again, we'll talk a little bit about Firebending in just a second here. But I really liked on the Zuko cards. In the game of Magic, the word exile means many things, but it means also something very special to Zuko himself. So we definitely leaned into that a little bit, with exiling being a kind of motif that we'll see on a couple of different Zuko-themed cards.
Next, we're going to show off a trio of cards that hit some of those, again, those smaller moments that you were talking about. But what I think I love most about these is just the care and the love that goes into these. Sakas Haiku is, once I realized what was going on, became my new favorite card in the set. But tell us a little bit about the flavor in these.
I want you to talk about the haiku, but more importantly, I want to talk about the message that I got about the haiku. You were like, hey, me and the teammate came up with something really funny. Here's what it is. What do you think? And I was like, I don't need to hear anything else. This card is protected till the end. No feedback, no restrictions. This is perfect. We won't put any flavor text on it. It's just like the level of inside joke that this is for a card game, for the IP, for the fans, was just so excellent. So just genius work.
I mean, for anyone who maybe isn't, fully caught up, I would recommend reading the text box out loud, and maybe that would help a little bit. But this was something where oftentimes during the development of Magic sets, we will come up with designs that make the design team laugh. And oftentimes maybe they're a little bit too silly and they maybe don't see the light of day.
Yeah.
But with Avatar, one of the things that people love about the show is the sense of humor and that kind of levity that it really brings to a, very also serious story. And so capturing this moment from an episode that is such full of joy and, humor, and also just everyone, as soon as they read this card, they were like, this has to stay. It can't get rid of it. And so thankfully, it was able to make it to the final, and yes, definitely one that is a lot of fun, not just for fans of the show, but also just for any poetry lovers out there. One other thing I'll note, and we'll talk a little bit about this again when we get to the mechanics section, but you can see that Sakas Haiku and Redirect Lightning are type lesson.
Yeah.
And this is something we added into the set really to get at one of the big themes of the show, which is all the characters do a lot of learning, both of specific techniques and forms of bending, but also, general life lessons. This is something that was really key to getting the feeling of the show. And when we asked people, what do you expect to see in Avatar? That was one of the things that they would always bring up. So we'll see a couple different lessons, as well as a lot of cards, especially mentor characters that care about the lessons and really focus on that element of learning and teaching that is so important to the heart of the show.
Yeah.
Speaking of mentor characters, on Fated Firepower, we've got Iroh,
Yeah.
my boy. It's so difficult to be like, oh, my favorite character is this, because they're all my favorite. But like Iroh has always been someone that like I always looked up to. You know, very young when I first watched the show, and he was always a character that I felt like was giving me guidance when I was trying to navigate, my youth. And so it was great to find moments where we could spotlight characters, not just on their legendary creature cards, but really give them a moment where you in the show were like, whoa, just like, and this is that moment, right? Like we are like peak Iroh, super buff, he's been working out, he's got the Grand Lotus outfit on, and he's ready to do what it takes to, win the day. And just like getting the moment right before he unleashes this attack, to me, is so much more powerful than just like the attack that itself. Finding ways to encourage our artists to really go all in on a moment was incredibly easy, because if someone was familiar with the show, they're like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do, and they just ran with it. And if they weren't familiar with the show, there's a lot of like great animate tropes and a lot of like animation tropes that the show is really well loved for, that we were able to provide as reference, and like, oh, okay, I understand, like this is what's happening here in the scene. And so I thought Fated Firepower was always a great way to showcase the martial arts that's involved with bending styles. It's not just when we would do something in Magic the Gathering, if we wanted to show a big fireball, like let's have Chandra do a big fireball, and it's cool and magical and epic and awesome. But part of what makes bending so important is the care of the study that went into creating the martial arts and inspired by real world martial arts to create what bending is. So I loved it when we were able to showcase the very specific natures, structures, pose, and positions of each bending style. And I think Fated Firepower does a really good job to communicate the strength of what's to come.
Mm-hmm. And just want to call out that, Iroh is also my favorite character. Reminds me a lot of my own, Japanese grandfather, who has, both that like stern mentor, but also the caring nature and the sense of humor that is so important to Iroh. So that's always been a very special character to me. And we're not going to see an Iroh today, but. Stay tuned.
Yeah, sure.
Just in that art, and also in the flavor text of Redirect Lightning.
Yeah, so Redirect Lightning represents something that whenever possible, Chris and I tried to do when we had a lesson card that was about something being carried through. We tried to put flavor text that was representative of the lesson being learned. So in Redirect Lightning, this is the moment where Zuko is redirecting the bolt that Ozai shoots at him, and he successfully redirects it back at him. This very cathartic, very defiant moment. But the flavor text isn't attributed to the scene. It's attributed to when Zuko learned about this move and maneuver that Iroh invented, imparting wisdom onto Zuko so that he hopefully would never have to use it, but should he have to, he would be prepared to. So these lessons are trying to be, whenever possible, packages that are complete of like when I learned the thing, and then when I have accomplished the thing I set out to learn.
Yeah.
You will see lessons that are about learning in the moment, because very often in the show, someone learns a very important lesson right when it happens. And so that's another way we were able to kind of capture that flavor of both like education and mentorship, but that sense of character progression and many times spiritual growth.
Yeah. Now, we can't talk about the stories of the show without having sagas. So, of course, we've got sagas in this set. And here is our first one that we showed off during the video. We've got The Rise of Sozin. Who is Sozin? What's going on here?
Yeah, so one of the things that both us and Avatar Studios was really keen on was tying into some of the characters that exist, within the history of the world of Avatar, even if they maybe weren't, alive during the time period of the show. And one of the ways that we decided to capture that was with these sagas that flip into creatures. If you played Neo Kamigawa, you might remember these cards. But essentially, there are a number of these sagas that tell the history of the world or tell something important from the past. And then when you get to the end of the saga, that character from history actually shows up, and is manifested in your game of Magic. Sozen is the one that's being featured here, and of course, Sozen was the one who started the 100 Years' War by, launching an attack on the Air Nations that extended all the way through until Aang, came to save the world at the end. You can see here that, starts with a lot of destruction, and then you're going to search and try to find the Avatar, which is the only thing that could potentially stop Sozen. But these cards, really fun way to get these larger-than-life, legendary characters from the past into the game while still feeling like they are, coherent with what's going on. We didn't want to necessarily just make creature cards of them, which would work, but this was a cooler way to say, like, hey, this is a person from history that you're seeing show up here.
And also because in the story of Avatar, the gang is constantly learning about these almost larger-than-life, mythical, historical characters. So just kind of what Chris was saying, for a while we had some legends in the file that was just like, yeah, these are good versions of these characters. But the saga, the DFC saga treatment really just brings them into that lore and that mythical moment. And so many episodes are about discovering what happened. I mean, there's a whole episode to like this, just trying to figure out what happened, who Sozen was, his relationship with Roku, and it's the Kickstarter to much of the exposition that creates the present day events of the series. But all the other sagas are trying to accomplish that same thing. It's like that either what that character or what that story was most known for, or what Aang and the team discover about them. And then when we get to the character side, it is what they are most known for, or encapsulating very specifically maybe an event that everyone always talks about. We're only going to talk about Sozen today, but I'm just going to say the green one is my favorite. I can't wait to talk about that in the future.
We will get there. Okay, and then before we move on to talking about some of the better-known characters from this set, of course, Sozen has a comment. We just have the art today. This is obviously a big moment in the series. We'll see this card later on.
We talk about mood. This is something that really...
This is a mood.
This is a mood, and when we talk about the different books, the tone progressively across the series goes from like goofy, lighthearted whimsy to eventually confronting, your destiny, and it gets darker and darker and darker. And just like, this is just such a encapsulation of the finale, right?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our cast of characters. Let's start with one card that we showed off much earlier. We've got Avatar Aang, Master of the Elements. And I know when we first showed this card off, there were a lot of questions. What is Waterbending, Earthbending, Firebending, and Airbending? We are going to talk about that in a little bit. We keep saying that, but we are going to.
Yes, today you will learn. You will learn all 4 elements.
But talk a little bit about this card, in brief. People have seen this one before, generally speaking.
Right. Well, this is a card that we spent a lot of time on to get right. We really wanted to, essentially, when we were trying to figure out, what does the ultimate Aang do, we spent a lot of time, came up with a lot of different things, but eventually the caring about mastering all 4 elements was not only the most fun sentence I've ever written on a Magic card, but also really sent you on a very fun, deck building quest, especially in Commander of, hey, like, can I get all these things to happen, and can I flip this over? And that really was such a fun quest to send players on because it felt so resonant and true to the show. The idea of, if I want to unlock the potential of the Avatar, I am going to have to find and master all 4 elements, and then I get an amazing, powerful reward. So this is a card we spent a lot of time on, and as we'll talk about in a second, the extremely exciting art treatment that we have for this card is makes it one of the coolest cards in the set for sure.
Yeah, and just a bit on the art is it was very delightful to have my work pretty much cut out for me of like, when do we show these? Like, well, he goes into his Avatar state usually around the finale of the coolest fight of that book, so we know exactly when we want to align the creative for the mechanics. Like, the conversation was very easy to have. Avatar Aang is the moment right before where he's confronting Ozai. We have all 4 elements in the piece, and then obviously, of course, the backside has to be like the sickest visual ever. I remember first seeing like the bubble of air and like the rings of all the elements around, and I was just like, when we told we were doing this, I was like vibrating in my seat, like, oh, I can't wait to get art of that scene. And it was very, I guess, like, cathartic to get there,
Yeah.
but then also to get there with what Brian did.
The one last thing before we go see that amazing art is that a lot of people have asked, like, hey, this Aang has the firebending symbol on him. Well,
Yeah.
just saying, there might be other Aangs in the set, and those Aangs might have different elemental focuses. So, get ready, get excited to see what the other Aangs might do.
Well, we do have one piece of art from another Aang. This is Aang, the Last Airbender.
And going back to mood, this is so like the pilot. This is so the first episode. This is so book one Aang, right? We just saw him at his height of power and how serious and fierce he looks, and then his ascension of the Avatar state. But here's that lovable goofball. Here is the Airbender with Momo, just not a care in the world, soaring through the sky. And I love that we get to have both, and it just shows what a great character Aang is, what a great character every single character in the show really is, because they have so much depth and so much growth. So being able to compare Aang the Last Airbender to Avatar Aang is just a really nice way to see his progression from episode 1 to the final episode.
Yeah. All right. Next, let's take a look at Tooff, the first metal bender.
So yeah, I guess it would become redundant to say, this is one of people's favorite characters, because I think almost every character is, people. It's one of the things that people love about the show.
I think we're going to be showing off a lot of someone's favorite
Yeah,
characters.
yeah.
Hopefully.
But Tooff, again, we really try to capture the various different elements of the characters throughout their journey. And Tooff sort of reaching her, pinnacle in the show as inventing metal bending, this whole new style of bending that really is a fundamental shift in the way that the world works. We really wanted to capture that by making a card that had a very funky line of text that really gets your brain
That is
working
a
and
funky
thinking.
line of text.
Right.
Yeah.
Just turning your artifacts into lands and thinking about the way that now makes them interact with all sorts of cards differently. Obviously, something as simple as landfall comes to mind immediately. But when we were playing and building with and testing this card, we found so many strange, bizarro interactions, which to me really captured that feeling of Tooff breaking the mold, of saying when I am here, the rules of the world are completely different because I have invented something brand new that is going to totally change the way that you think about, how the world works, and in this case, how the game works. So this is a card that we had a lot of fun coming up with very strange, cool, awesome things to do with this line of text.
What I love about this piece specifically, it might sound silly to say, but Tooff quite literally bending the metal in the art to the point where the metal almost takes on this like cloth-like texture. Like it's so easy to just like move and maneuver and sculpt and shape. It's just a real treat to showcase that moment of her like really flexing into her power, right? This is not the moment of discovery. This is the moment of her really using it for her intended purpose for the, in the season finale. And I just like that we get this, connotation of bending, and in the art, sometimes we quite literally get to showcase that.
Yeah. Now, we didn't want to leave today without showing some of the progression for at least one character, so we are going to show two different Qataras here. So first, let's meet Qatara, Water Tribe's Hope.
Yeah, so this Qatara is kind of, the second Qatara in the sequence. We've got, this is her kind of at the end of book 1, beginning of book 2, really when she has become a waterbending master and is moving towards, she spends a lot of book 1 kind of, growing in power, but hasn't quite gained all of her abilities. In book 2 is when she really comes into her own, both as a leader and as a fighter. And this Qatara was, of all the Qataras, we wanted to make sure that at least one of them really was able to beat people's face in. Because one of the nice things about getting to make multiple versions of the characters that explore different parts of the story, that you get to capture different parts of them throughout their journey. And one of the important parts of Qatara's character is, she's a, great leader and she's supportive and she's kind, but she also is a fighter. That's a huge part of her journey as a character, showing that, hey, she doesn't have to be like, on the sideline supporting. She is one of the most capable fighters, of the group. And so here we get to see her being able to really put out a lot of damage, especially when backed up by a team of allies.
Yeah.
And really leveraging the kind of open-ending nature of waterbending, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the waterbending mechanic really allowing you to, be very flexible in the way that you're using your resources, and in this case, to potentially hit people with very large creatures.
The other thing too, and I'm glad you said it, Chris, is like this is Qatara really taking on her like martial prowess moment, and so we incorporated the kind of like luminous light that comes with kind of like her healing abilities as a part of something that it's more of an aggressive technique that she's getting ready to do to go into some form of combat. So we wanted to highlight and showcase that she has these capabilities. It also adds, again, that layer of like magic and mysticism to it, but the focus is not that on the card, but it really helps kind of put the connotation of waterbending across the blue and white mana colors to kind of call back to her in-world abilities and then showcase them mechanically and how they want to be tied together.
All right, now let's take a look at Qatara the Fearless. So if you were fortunate enough to be at San Diego Comic-Con, you may have received a promo version of this. This is the main set version. But we haven't even talked about this yet. There's a focus on allies in this set.
That's right. So you probably have spied on a number of different characters that the type ally is there. And that was something that came up very early in design that we were like, well, there's a really strong emphasis in the show of the people of the various nations all coming together. That's one of the big things that sort of allows the protagonist of the show to actually be able to defeat the Fire Nation is getting allies from all over the world to join together in a way that the nations kind of hadn't really done before. So we started out with allies, and the more that we played with them, the more that we loved the ability for the allies to kind of, really represent that nature of people from all different nations and backgrounds coming together to take on this threat. So Qatara here, this is, in book 3 when she's really come into her own as more of like one of the gang that is leading this charge, leading the, attack on the Fire Nation. And not every ally in the set, as we've seen from a variety of characters, not every ally in the set has that classic, ally from Zendikar style ability about, when allies enter, something happens. But we have really tried a lot to make sure that the allies from this set will work really well with those previous allies. So in this case, obviously, many previous allies have triggered abilities that Qatara now is able to double all of them.
Yeah.
And so even though the allies in this set will look a little bit different from the previous ones, it was really important to us that we wanted to still maintain some of that original mechanical identity of the allies, and get you excited about playing, these allies, not only with allies from this set, but with allies from previous sets as well.
And this is another moment that just like Universes Beyond really showcases that high five, that handshake between our game and the IP that we're working with, because taking allies, which is just very specifically Magic the Gathering, and then equating it to like, well, it's all of the characters of the show coming to work together and over time form, these bonds between nations coming together. Like flavorfully, it fit very perfectly, and since it was such a iconic and like classic bit of Magic's history, being able to pull it forward and reunite them just was like such a perfect moment. And I remember when you came over to my desk, you were like, hey, what do you think about allies? I'm like, allies are pretty cool. You're like, what do you think about allies for Avatar? And I was like, you don't need to say, I already kind of get that. Like, there was no like, okay, but we could do this. The pitch was like, oh no, that already makes sense because it's thematically resonant to the progression of the show. And then it became very exciting to figure out, well, how can we bring back allies, in terms of Magic gameplay specifically. So I thought it ended up becoming another way that UB can really showcase and highlight the relationship that Magic has with whatever awesome thing that we're collaborating with.
Yeah. All right. You've already seen Sakas Haiku. Now let's meet Saka Bold Boomeranger.
I love this name. And this flavor text, is, this lives in my head. Like how Saka sees himself, I'm just a guy with a boomerang, is like, it's said in a variety of different tones and ways, and it's reflective of how he feels about himself. But also it's just like, the ingenuity behind Saka, when we were kind of talking about like his mana alignment, blue red, it's a great conversation to have about Saka and his progression. But there's just something fun about having a Saka card that is just fun to say, like bold boomeranger is fun to say, the quote is fun to say, and the card is just fun to play with, and it brings that spirit that Saka brings. He's fun. He's not always lighthearted, but he always brings some sort of like gag or whimsy to it. And just this card being very playable and very fun to say, very fun to cast, and the art just being like that kind of like cool bravado side of him. I thought it just created a very nice package of where Saka's at this point in the story.
And while we won't see it today, I would keep your eyes out. There may or may not be a boomerang in the set that works quite well with this card.
All right. Now let's meet what is certainly going to be one of the more popular cards in the set. Appa Steadfast Guardian. There's a lot going on here. How important was it to get Appa correct?
I mean, like we were saying earlier, Appa is one of the most iconic parts of the show, especially from a visual perspective. Our lands are entirely Appa themed, and there's tons of, Appa plushes and merch that I've seen throughout my years. So, I mean, Appa, just an extremely beloved character, and really, like, that's one of the things is that when it comes to, these animal companions that are part of the gang, they really are characters, not just kind of, like sidekicks or, steeds. But like Appa, I mean, Appa has like an entire episode dedicated to just following his adventure. So, we treat Appa just like, a variety of the other characters, in terms of making sure that we're, capturing multiple moments from his story and representing him. And in this case, we do have to always create a balance of, which characters want to be many colors versus want to be focused in. And generally speaking, because of kind of the nature of the show, the way that a lot of the other characters worked, there were a lot of main characters that were already getting very heavy multicolor, 3-color cards that were great for Commander. So we decided Appa would be a great character to keep monocolor so we can go into lots of different decks and really help to, lots of different decks, especially in Commander where you're really color restricted.
Yeah.
Appa gets to sort of, show up and be a powerful, ally, literally, to all of the different characters.
Yeah. All right. We're going to come back to mechanics, as we keep saying, but we're actually really close now. One more card, and then we're going to go on to mechanics, because we need to take a look at Momo, Friendly Flyer.
It's Momo.
That's right, the last member of the gang, of course, Momo here. And Momo here is kind of tying into one of the themes that we'll see a little bit in the limited of the set especially, which is, flying. The set has, the show has so much of a focus on, like literally it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender, and many of our main characters fly. And so flying is definitely one of the themes that, it's a classic Magic mechanic. It's super resonant for a lot of the characters. And so Momo here is one of our cards that is really focused on that, joy and experience of being in the air, which is again, one of the important things that is, built into the identity of the show. But on top of that, I think also just, to me, it really helps when you see characters that from a show like Avatar, when they are brought into Magic, kind of communicating things like, to me, it was really important that Momo was a really small, cheap flyer, and that he was, powerful at supporting, the other characters. Because to me, that is what Momo's role in the show is. He's very small, very nimble and agile, and he's not packing the biggest punch. And so I think that one of the really cool things that we get to do with Universes Beyond is trying to slot characters into their role in the game of Magic, similar to what their role in the show that they're coming from is.
Yeah.
And also, there's the old adage of the show of, where's Momo? I like to think that in this art piece specifically, this is probably the one time he's not off causing trouble, stealing something, getting into someone's food, where he's just making some friends with some other friendly flyers.
All right. Now, as we've been saying, we're going to move on to the mechanics. So most of the time at first look, we don't talk about mechanics. It's a little early. You don't have the full context of the set. But as we were looking at the set, we can't talk about the set without talking about what the bending mechanics
And I mean,
are.
we've just seen so many characters, and so many of them use the bending mechanics, so it's really hard to not talk about them.
Exactly. So we are going to talk about them. We're going to start with airbending. So let's go back to Appa. Appa's going to highlight airbending here. So tell us about airbending, Chris.
Yeah, so airbending is a mechanic, so you airbend a permanent, and that means that you exile that permanent, and as long as it's exiled, its owner can cast it for 2 mana rather than its mana cost. So that's not additional, that's instead of. So, if you airbend a 1-drop, it costs 2 to bring back. But if you airbend a 6-drop, it also costs 2 to bring back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that when we were working on the bending mechanics, I mean, that's really the heart of the set from a mechanical standpoint is, hey, this is the unique element of this show. It's the thing that obviously everyone is going to be excited to see. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting all of the mechanics really correct. And one of the big things about bending in Avatar, the thing that makes it so exciting, as a magic system and as like a power system, is how flexible all of the bending mechanics are. One of the joys of watching the show is that you're constantly getting to see new inventive uses of the bending that you might not have thought of before, or maybe even the characters haven't thought of before. And so it was really important for us to capture that in our bending mechanics. So for airbending, for example, airbending can be used kind of to delay your opponent by getting their stuff off the board. And it's going to cost 2 to bring back. That's not that expensive, so they could probably replay it in the next turn, but maybe just getting rid of it temporarily is going to be useful for you. And that felt very airbending to us, the idea of, hey, like, we're not necessarily hurting you or getting rid of you forever, we're just going to like temporarily disable you. But sometimes you want to airbend your own stuff, because again, if you airbend a 6-drop, it only costs 2 to bring back, and you can get a huge ETB over and over again, potentially using airbending. So that kind of dual use and kind of figuring out when you want to airbend what was something that was really compelling to us. This mechanic especially, came straight from Mark Gottlieb, who had never seen the show before. But we were sitting around trying to think of what airbending we were doing. We came up with a bunch of different ideas, but none of them were quite working. And Gottlieb was like, can someone explain to me what airbending does? And we explained it to him, and he was like, what about this? And that went straight into the file and it stuck the whole time. As soon as we played with it, we were like, this is gold. So shout out to Mark Gottlieb for inventing airbending. But so we will see not only, like Appa here, and also, plays well with Zuko that we saw earlier, caring about exiled cards. There is a little bit of a theme about blinking your own things and bringing them back, because airbending is one way to do that.
Okay. All right, now let's talk about waterbending. So we're going to bring back up Qatara Water Tribe's Hope. That Waterbend X there. What's going on here?
So waterbending is a type of cost. This one is X, but we've seen on previous cards, like Aangs Iceberg, like oftentimes it will just be a number. And that cost, you can just pay it with mana, as you normally would. But waterbending also gives you the option to pay by tapping your creatures or your artifacts. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in the way that you're paying the cost, which was really the key word for us with waterbending. We did spend some time looking at kind of classically water-themed mechanics. But turns out, tapping and stunning all of your opponent's creatures every turn, or bouncing all of their stuff, those things weren't really they weren't very fun, frankly, but they also weren't capturing what we felt was more at the core of waterbending, which was the idea of being very flexible and being able to change your approach to different situations. And so with waterbending, if you've got a lot of mana, great, you can just pay the mana cost. But if you have a lot of tokens in play, especially if you've got creature tokens or clue tokens, you're going to be able to tap your various permanents to pay these costs, and that gives you a lot more flexibility with the way that your turns play out. Like maybe one turn you'll activate it using mana, and the next turn you'll tap your creatures and use your mana to cast a different spell. And so really, you'll see, in the variety of waterbending cards that we see over time, that waterbending is used in a large number of different ways to get different types of outputs. And so you have a lot of flexibility in both the input and the output of your waterbending cards.
Okay.
And I'll just say I had one specific play test when we were playing this for the first time, and just the sheer notion of like tapping down my board and then going straight into my upkeep to untap everything Like, it was just like a push and pull of literally like my hands water bending my permanents up and down. And that was like a very small moment for me, was like, even beyond like creative and mechanical flavor, the sheer act of physically with my cards, like I got the notion of what it was going for. And it was a very, very tiny thing that gave me so much joy. Highly encourage you at pre-release to really go over, if you're playing waterbending cards, like really dramatically move your hands back and forth when you tap and untap. You'll really feel it.
All right, next, let's learn about Earthbending.
Right. So Earthbending, lets you put +1/+1 counters on your lands to turn them into creatures, and you can chuck them at your opponent, or use them as a wall to block for you. But if your land dies or is exiled, it's going to return to the battlefield. And Earthbending is pretty similar to some previous mechanics we've seen in Magic before, particularly Awaken. But making one of the downsides of these mechanics is that you would oftentimes get yourself into a sticky situation if you did them too early in the game. So if you had a 2-drop that woke up one of your lands, well, if your land gets shocked, now you're down a land, and that's pretty disastrous in the game of Magic. So we were trying to look for a way to prevent that from happening. And so ensuring that your land always comes back, if it dies, if it's exiled, your land will return to the battlefield, meant that you could now be feel a lot safer turning your lands into creatures. And once we got rid of the danger of that, it allowed us to make a lot more cards with the mechanic and made it way more fun. Because now, hey, if you're trade your 4/4 for their 4/4, you're not down a land, which is such a huge resource to lose. So Earthbending really, again, when we're talking about the bending mechanics, flexibility was a huge, focus for us in terms of capturing the feeling of bending. So the idea of Earthbending, where you can, double or triple down on the same land and have a huge creature, or you could maybe spread it out and have a bunch of smaller sized creatures. But if and to be clear, that's each instance of Earthbending you can choose. So Earthbending 4 means put 4 counters on something, but if you had another card that Earthbended, you could choose the same thing or a different thing and have multiple creatures. But the wider you go, the more of your lands are going to get taken up, acting as creatures. So you have to weigh that. And again, that flexibility was a big focus for us in design. On top of that, I'll also call out that, this is a lesson, Earthbending lesson, and this is one of our common lessons. In the case of our common lessons, we oftentimes are trying to capture the sort of core fundamental building blocks of Aang's journey, of him learning all 4 elements. And we see him pictured here with Tooff, who is his Earthbending master, and we'll see a couple more of those as we learn more about the set in the weeks and months to come. But the lessons in this set, one thing that I should call out is there's a lot of cards in the set that care about the type lesson. But this set doesn't feature learn, which was a keyword that went alongside lessons with the original Strixhaven. When we were playing with lessons, we really brought them into the set for flavor, because we loved the flavor of learning the lessons, learning the different elements, learning the different life lessons, and having the mentor characters that cared about those things, or the student characters that cared about those things. But learn itself didn't quite fit into the way that we wanted to design the set. It was a little bit too complex and had a lot of moving parts. So you're not going to see any learn cards in this set. But of course, the subtype lesson still does what it used to do, which means that any of your old learn cards are still going to be able to fetch these cards out of your sideboard. But we're not going to see any new learn cards in this set. We will just see a number of cards that care about the subtype lesson.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you just answered a question for several people in chat.
And here we can also see another lesson that has flavor text from the person teaching the lesson itself.
You'll see lessons like this where Aang is learning one of his elements is depicted and concepted to be generally the scene where he gets like the most wisdom, or it's his time to learn something, or he's had some sort of epiphany. We pulled the flavor text from the mentor character to be very like, what is the one-line thing that Aang needed to hear to understand to kind of unblock himself, especially for Earthbending, which was such a struggle for him. I'll also call out Momo here hitching a ride on one of the boulders here. Just a lot of fun. Momo does seem to just kind of show up a lot in the background of many scenes in the show, and he just kind of disappears all the time. In fact, it happened a number of times throughout our set where Momo has just showed up in the background of art all across the set. So as you see more cards, be vigilant in looking out for some more hidden Momos.
All right. Our final bending mechanic for the set. Let's take a look at Firebending.
So Firebending is a keyword that creatures have, and whenever a creature with Firebending attacks, you get that much red mana until the end of combat. So that means you can use it to cast instants during combat, like combat tricks or removal spells. You can use it to activate activated abilities, and that goes all the way up until end of combat as well. So sometimes you'll attack, block, deal damage, and then you'll use your mana right at the end of combat too. So again, going back to that keyword of flexibility, for us, the idea of, initially when we first started, making the set, it's like fire, that's damage, right? Like I care about damage. But what we found was that that was a little bit of a narrow view of firebending, as we learn in the show itself. Firebending isn't all destructive, but also that it's so evocative. The red mana symbol is so evocative of creating fire. Firebending is the only bending of the four that actually creates the element kind of out of thin air. And once we had sort of tried out this idea of creating mana, it really opened up so much in terms of, hey, this isn't just about kind of, aggression or dealing damage anymore, but this mana can be used in so many different ways. There are so many different things that you can do with mana. It's the fundamental, resource of the game of Magic. And so that idea of you can create a bunch of extra mana, but it's temporary, so you have to find out a way to use it in the heat of battle, that was so evocative of Firebending and really led us to so many fun designs, and honestly, Firebending was one of the mechanics that we settled on the earliest, because when we tried this out, it was so fun and so flavorful that we were just like, this is a slam dunk.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned doing things during combat. I see this card, Fire Nation attacks. To me, it feels very much like a sorcery. You're making tokens. It's got a big flashback cost, but you made it an instant. I would assume there's a lot of
Yeah. I mean, like there's going to be a lot of cards, especially in red in this set, that are instant speed to work well with Firebending. In this case, the Fire Nation attacks is a great card to play. If you've got some Firebenders out, you can play it a little bit early, and then the Firebenders that it makes can help to pay for its own flashback cost.
Yeah.
This is one of the a handful of cards in the set that have flashback. Again, kind of alluding to that this is the Fire Nation attack is not only such an important moment in the past that we're getting to see as a flashback, but also you hear it at the beginning of every single episode. So having the Fire Nation attack multiple times felt really resonant to us for the experience of as being a fan of the show.
Yeah.
One other card I'll call out that we saw earlier, Faded Firepower, right? This is another, that card, it has flash. So it can flash in and give everything bonus damage, but that especially works really well if you've got a bunch of temporary mana that you have to spend during combat. So cards like that, there's going to be a lot of things that players can find, creative and fun uses for their mana.
Yep. All right. Typically, this show ends at 11 o'clock. We try to be an hour. We're going to go a little bit over today because we have 4 minutes until then, and we still have. He's laughing.
I warned.
They're laughing because they know how much is left. We're going to run through some of the booster fun pretty fast because you'll have seen these cards, but they are cool treatments. We're going to start with the headliner card. Again, you've seen this card. This is Avatar Aang, but the raised foil, that's going to be a pretty card to open.
Absolutely beautiful. Brian really brought so much energy to this piece, and the set would fundamentally just be completely different if we didn't have something as special as this waiting for you.
And it was so awesome that getting to work with the creators of the
cool.
show. They're
So
very
nice.
involved in all of their partnerships, which is awesome.
Amazing.
Next up, Borderless Field Notes. So we're going to see this on some of the characters like Appa and Momo.
Just charming, beautiful, and feels very resonant to the in-world art we see throughout the show to try and recapture that as if someone is going around charting all the wonderful, weird, and whimsical creatures we see throughout the show.
Yep. Then we're going to see the Elemental Frame, which we're going to see here on Qatara.
Yeah, and on these cards, you can see that in the the upper left-hand corner of the text box, rather than having the watermarks kind of be behind the text like it is in the normal treatment, these cards all have a specialty place for an elemental symbol to go, and you'll see that that will correspond to whatever character is being depicted in this elemental frame.
Great. All right, and then we've got this next one's really cool. The Borderless Battle Pose. This is Fire Lord Zuko, textless. Really cool card.
Yeah, straight from the show intro. That kind of like silhouetted, highlighted by its elemental light. It was very fun to try and recreate this and push it forward on a handful of cards.
Yep. We'll have more details on exactly where and when all of these drop in a future article, but for now, these are pretty cool. And of course, we're going to have extended art cards. The next one. So this is a new card.
Yeah, peek at Hakoda.
Yeah, a little Hakoda.
Yeah, Hakoda, you know, Saka and Qatara's father, leads the Southern Water Tribe warriors, and also is instrumental in, you know, when they launch their attack on the Fire Nation. And again, you can see here kind of the ally call out of, you know, there are going to be many cards in the set that care and benefit your allies.
And then we have borderless double-faced cards. We've got double-faced cards. These are going to get...
These are some of my favorite.
Yeah. All right, and we're not done showing off new cards yet. So, well, we jumped to it. All right, so borderless source material.
Yep.
These are going to be reprints using source material art. People who were around for Final Fantasy, which wasn't that long ago. So probably most of you are going to be familiar with the source material treatment. This one's going to be a little different. Chris, you were saying the drop rate's a little different.
That's right. These are going to be showing up a lot less frequently in play boosters than for Final Fantasy. So you will still be getting, I believe, one of these in every collector booster. But in play boosters, I think they're closer to one in 25 or so, something around that. So they're going to be showing up a lot less in the limited environment if you're playing with play boosters, but you're still going to be getting them in all of your collector boosters. On top of that, I also want to call out that at the bottom of the card there, you can see it says, you know, Book 3 Fire, Chapter 61. So one of the special things that we wanted to do with the source material for this set was there's, you know, not that many episodes of Avatar. Wouldn't it be cool if one shot from every episode made it onto the sheet? So as you see more and more of these borderless cards, you're going to see that every single one is from a different episode, and they all capture different moments. And, you know, if you go ahead and collect them all, you kind of have a cool, you know, you can lay them out and view the entire series from beginning to end with one card for every episode. Very
cool. And to answer a question in chat, because this is important, no, the source material cards are not standard legal. They've got that TLE. TLE. And one more source material card, just because we can. Because we wanted to show, so Force Negation has a magic name. This one has a Last Airbender name with the magic name under it.
Right, that is also, I think, a little bit different from Final Fantasy, is that for many names that fit perfectly well into the world of Avatar, we kept the original name, but for a few, especially legendary ones, we've renamed to, you know, fit within the show.
Yep, absolutely. All right, and almost to the end here. We haven't even talked about Jumpstart. So after Last Airbender,
that's true.
There's going to be some Jumpstart packs. We're going to, again, try to do this relatively quickly because we've got 4 more cards to show off. So Jumpstart, let's see one of our first Jumpstart cards. We've got Aang Airbending Master. Talk a little bit about the Jumpstart product generally, and then we'll go through these cards.
Right. So when we talked to fans about potentially doing Avatar, one of the loudest pieces of feedback that we got over and over was that people really wanted to be able to bring their friends and family into Magic using Avatar.
Yeah.
It was one of the core things that people were always talking about. Their spouses, their siblings, their kids, they wanted to bring people in because they knew they loved Avatar so much. And so that led us to wanting to create Avatar Jumpstart as the easiest way to get people into the game. Just grab a couple packs, shuffle them together. That's one of the beauties of Jumpstart, is how easy it is to start playing. But you know, we didn't just want to, you know, repackage, you know, cards from the main set. We also wanted to make sure that the Jumpstart cards got to have some cool, unique, new cards of their own. So here we can see Aang from Jumpstart. And you can see down there, he uses experience counters.
Yep.
That's actually a mechanic that shows up on a couple of different cards in the Jumpstart product. again, kind of capturing that feeling of the characters learning and growing over time and getting stronger. We're going to see a couple of different characters that use experience counters as kind of a cool, mechanic that sets these cards apart from the main set.
We also have a couple of these cards, Aang, and then another one we'll see soon, that it is them attempting to reach mastery with their bending element. We are showcasing Aang here as he is in Book 1, because when we meet him, he's actually already an airbending master. So we can kind of see his experiences kind of showing off what he's already mastered.
Yeah. All right, next up we have Qatara, Waterbending Master.
Which you can see here, we kind of depict her later into Book 3, where she is really a master of her element at that point in time as she's gone through her whole journey to get there.
Right, and the nature of Jumpstart means that these cards are going to be monocolor, and that's one of the reasons why in the main set we see so many 3-color legends. We wanted to make sure that there were lots of different options so that if players wanted to play a many-colored commander deck, they could do that with main set cards. But maybe they want to build a monocolor deck, or maybe they just want a version of Qatara that they can put into other blue decks.
Yeah.
So the Jumpstart cards, are primarily monocolor, both to make Jumpstart work, but also just to give players more different options.
Yep. All right, and then we have Fire Lord Ozai.
Yeah, so this is a piece we actually also got early on. Now, normally when we concept legendary creature cards, we don't put them so far away from the frame, or it's difficult to see them. But this version of Ozai is the looming villain throughout Book 1 and the first half of Book 2, where we don't know much about him. We just know he's the threat that is coming and everything is building towards. So when we wanted to create this piece, it was very important to me that we captured almost like the idea of Ozai versus Ozai himself. So he is too good for us, so we sit way far back in the frame. We see more of his troops and the palace itself and the fire, that what he represents versus the man that he is.
And I know we're trying to wrap up, but just really quick, I do want to call out something that's kind of obvious if you've been looking at the cards, but just to say it explicitly, right? Not every single character that is a firebender, for example, has the firebending mechanic.
Sure.
Many do, but we also have other cards that just work well with firebending, just to make, it got a little repetitive if every single character had exactly the same ability. And here we can see Fire Lord Ozai as an example of a card that doesn't have exactly firebending, but has abilities that clearly play well and tie into firebending as a theme.
Yep. And then last, but certainly not least, the Cabbage Merchant.
Yeah, we had to show him.
Fan favorite. And the Cabbage Merchant, here I want to call out just as an example of this Jumpstart product has a lot of fun packet themes.
Yep.
A full team of designers that were all Avatar fans worked to make sure that it wasn't just, green packet number 3, but it was, no, let's make a Cabbage Merchant packet that has food tokens and is all themed around the cabbages. And there'll be a couple of more kind of, the packets are themed around various different characters or various different themes or places in the world. And that is something that was really important to make sure that Jumpstart had its own identity and was delivering on things that were going to delight fans of the show, even beyond things that we could fit into the main set.
And also, we needed to show him in a moment of serenity and peace and kindness. But if you look at the top right of the art, there is a sled about to careen into his beloved cart. So that moment won't last for long.
Yeah, we might be seeing more of the Cabbage Merchant on some other art pieces, and he isn't always this happy.
I will call out, as chat has, that the cards with this set symbol and the TLE in the lower left will not be standard legal. They will be legal in Eternal formats. All right, let's take a look at the products that are going to be coming out with this set. We've got play boosters, collector boosters. There's those Jumpstart boosters in the upper right. There's a bundle in the lower left. And then, Chris, what's going on with the pre-release packs there?
Yeah, so for this pre-release, we've decided to lean into the theming, and it will be a seeded pre-release where when you show up, you get to pick one of these 5 characters, and your box is going to have a special booster pack that is entirely that character's color, and always has that character in it. So if you bring your friend who loves Tooff, if they pick the Tooff box, they are for sure going to get a version of Tooff in that box.
Very cool.
One of the things especially is people always ask me, they're like, there's 4 elements, but there's 5 colors. What's the 5th one going to be? So for pre-release, for example, they were like, okay, there's, what's the black box going to be? And I was like, the black box is Azula. And as soon as I say that, everyone's like,
Yep.
of course. No further questions.
Chat was already talking about that.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's perfect.
So yeah, these are your 5 pre-release options, and you'll get that character guaranteed.
Perfect. All right, we only went 8 minutes over, but thank you for sticking with us. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dylan, for walking us through this first look. There's so much more coming for this set. We're so excited for this one. Some dates to keep in mind: previews and the debut are going to start in earnest on October 28th. The pre-release, circle this on your calendars now, start talking to your local game store, is going to happen starting on November 14th. And then the global release happens November 21st. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.